The morning of June 21, 2025, started like any other adventure day for Juliana Marens, a vibrant 26-year-old Brazilian woman from Niterói, Rio de Janeiro. She had traveled thousands of miles to Indonesia, drawn by the promise of conquering Mount Rinjani, the country's second highest volcano and one of its most challenging trekking destinations. The active volcano, standing majestically on the island of Lombok, attracts thousands of adventurous souls each year with its stunning crater lake and breathtaking sunrise views. Juliana wasn't alone in this ambitious endeavor. She had joined a group of 5 other tourists, all eager to experience the raw beauty of this geological wonder. Their local guide, experienced in navigating the treacherous terrain, led them through the pre-dawn darkness at approximately 6:30 a.m. local time. The air was crisp, visibility was poor, and the only illumination came from their simple lanterns cutting through the thick morning mist. As they ascended the challenging trail that borders the volcano's crater, the group moved steadily upward. The path was notoriously difficult, slippery, narrow, and unforgiving to those who underestimated its dangers. For Juliana, who had been looking forward to this adventure for months, the physical demands of the hike began to take their toll much sooner than expected. The exhaustion crept in gradually, then suddenly became overwhelming. Her breathing became labored, her steps uncertain, and her energy reserves rapidly depleted. In what would become a fateful decision, Juliana made the choice that would change everything. She asked the guide to let her rest while the others continued their ascent to the summit. The guide, following standard protocol for exhausted hikers, found what appeared to be a safe resting spot for Juliana along the trail. The decision seemed reasonable at the time. She would wait there while the group completed their journey to the summit. Then they would collect her on their way back down. It was a common practice on challenging mountain treks, and the guide had done this countless times before without incident. However, Mount Rinjani had other plans. As Juliana sat alone in the misty dawn, something went terribly wrong. Whether it was a moment of disorientation, a misstep while trying to find a more comfortable position, or simply the treacherous nature of the volcanic terrain, disaster struck. In an instant that would haunt everyone involved, Juliana slipped and fell into the abyss. The accident happened so quickly and quietly that no one witnessed it. When the group returned from their summit attempt, expecting to find Juliana rested and ready for the descent, they were met with an empty trail and growing panic. Their calls echoed across the volcanic landscape, but only silence answered back. The realization hit them like a physical blow. Juliana had vanished without a trace. The guide immediately initiated emergency protocols, contacting local rescue services and alerting authorities about the missing Brazilian tourist. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community of local guides and rescue workers who knew the mountain's deadly reputation. Mount Rinjani had claimed another victim, but this time there was still hope, if they could find her quickly enough. As news of the accident reached Indonesian authorities, a search and rescue operation was hastily organized. The clock was already ticking against them. The Indonesian Search and Rescue Agency, Basarnas, mobilized their teams within hours of receiving the distress call. Mount Rinjani's rescue operations are notoriously complex due to the volcano's active status, unpredictable weather patterns, and extremely dangerous terrain. The mountain has witnessed numerous accidents over the years, but each rescue mission presents unique challenges that test even the most experienced teams. Initial ground searches proved futile. The rescue teams rappelled down various cliff faces and explored accessible ravines, but the sheer scale of the volcanic landscape made it nearly impossible to cover every potential area where Juliana might have fallen. The terrain was a maze of rocky outcrops, deep crevasses, and unstable volcanic soil that could give way without warning. Meanwhile, back in Brazil, Juliana's family received the devastating news. Her parents, siblings, and extended family were thrust into a nightmare scenario. Their beloved daughter and sister was missing somewhere on a remote Indonesian volcano, and there was little they could do but wait and pray. The Brazilian embassy in Jakarta was immediately contacted, and diplomatic channels were activated to ensure maximum cooperation between Brazilian and Indonesian authorities. The family's anguish was compounded by the distance and communication barriers. Getting reliable, real-time updates about the search operation proved challenging, with information often filtered through multiple sources and languages before reaching them. Each hour that passed without news felt like an eternity, and the family began organizing their own support network to maintain pressure on authorities and coordinate with media outlets. As the first day of searching concluded without success, the operation entered a more critical phase. Advanced equipment would be needed, including drone technology and specialized climbing gear. On the second day of the search operation, June 22nd, a breakthrough came through technology that would both provide hope and reveal the true magnitude of the challenge ahead. A specialized drone equipped with high-resolution cameras was deployed to survey areas that were impossible for human rescuers to access safely. The unmanned aircraft methodically scanned the volcanic terrain, its cameras penetrating through patches of mist and vegetation. Then, approximately 36 hours after Juliana's disappearance, the drone operator spotted something that made everyone's heart skip a beat. A human figure lying motionless in an almost inaccessible ravine. The coordinates showed she had fallen an estimated 500 to 600 meters below the original hiking trail, a distance that seemed impossible to survive. Yet there she was, visible through the drone's camera lens. The discovery location was a nightmare scenario for rescue operations. Juliana had landed in a narrow gorge surrounded by near-vertical cliff faces, with loose volcanic rock that could trigger deadly landslides at any moment. The area was so remote and dangerous that even experienced mountain rescue specialists hesitated to attempt an immediate extraction. Weather conditions further complicated the situation. Mount Rinjani's notorious climate had turned hostile, with dense fog rolling in and out unpredictably, heavy rainfall making surfaces even more treacherous, and strong winds that grounded the drone for extended periods. Visibility dropped to mere meters at times, making any rescue attempt not just difficult but potentially suicidal for the rescue teams. Despite locating Juliana, the rescue teams faced a heartbreaking reality. They could see her, but they couldn't reach her. The equipment they had brought, including ropes and climbing gear, was insufficient for such an extreme vertical rescue operation. The inadequacy of the rescue equipment became painfully apparent as teams attempted their first descent toward Juliana's location. The ropes they had brought were simply too short to reach the bottom of the ravine where she lay. What should have been a straightforward technical rescue turned into a logistical nightmare requiring specialized equipment that wasn't immediately available on the remote Indonesian island. Rescue coordinator Ahmad Shukri faced an agonizing decision. His teams were trained and willing to risk their lives, but attempting a rescue with insufficient equipment could result in additional casualties without helping Juliana. The volcanic terrain was unstable, with loose rocks constantly shifting and threatening to cascade down onto anyone below. Every minute counted, but a rushed attempt could prove fatal for everyone involved. Meanwhile, conflicting reports began emerging from various sources, creating confusion and frustration for Juliana's family back in Brazil. Indonesian authorities initially released statements suggesting that rescue teams had managed to provide Juliana with water, food, and warm clothing. These reports were quickly picked up by international media and even repeated by Brazilian diplomatic sources. However, the reality on the ground was starkly different. Rescue teams had not been able to make physical contact with Juliana at all. The reports of supplied provisions were either miscommunications or wishful thinking that had somehow been transformed into official statements. When Juliana's family learned the truth, their anguish turned to anger at the misinformation that had given them false hope. The Brazilian embassy in Jakarta found itself in the uncomfortable position of having to retract earlier statements and acknowledge that the situation was far more dire than initially communicated. Trust between the family and official sources began to erode just when clear communication was most crucial. As the second night fell on Mount Rinjani, Juliana had now been exposed to the harsh volcanic environment for over 48 hours, without food, water, or proper shelter. The temperature on the mountain dropped significantly after sunset, and the combination of potential injuries from her fall, dehydration, and hypothermia created a rapidly deteriorating survival scenario. Every hour that passed reduced her chances of survival exponentially. Back in Brazil, Juliana's family launched a desperate social media campaign to maintain international pressure on rescue operations. Her sister created hashtags that began trending across Brazilian social platforms, while her parents gave emotional interviews to major news outlets. The story captured the attention of millions of Brazilians who felt a personal connection to Juliana's plight, seeing their own daughters, sisters, and friends in her situation. The family's public appeals weren't just emotional, they were strategic. They demanded transparency from both Brazilian and Indonesian authorities, called for additional resources to be deployed, and questioned why more advanced rescue equipment hadn't been brought to the site immediately. Their criticism of the rescue operations coordination began attracting attention from Brazilian government officials who promised to intervene diplomatically. Indonesian rescue teams, feeling the mounting pressure, worked through the night to secure longer ropes and more sophisticated climbing equipment. However, the nearest source for such specialized gear was hours away by road, and then it would need to be transported up the mountain, a process that could take an entire additional day. The weather forecast offered little hope. Meteorologists predicted continued poor conditions with intermittent heavy rainfall and persistent fog that would severely limit visibility and make any rescue attempt even more dangerous than it already was. By June 23rd, the third day of the crisis, Juliana had been trapped in the volcanic ravine for over 60 hours. The psychological toll on everyone involved was becoming as challenging as the physical obstacles. Rescue team members, who had been working around the clock, were showing signs of exhaustion and emotional strain. Several had to be rotated out after becoming too emotionally invested in the outcome to maintain the clear judgment necessary for such a dangerous operation. The arrival of additional equipment finally offered a glimmer of hope. Longer ropes, advanced climbing harnesses, and specialized rescue gear had been transported from Jakarta, but the logistics of getting everything up the mountain and into position proved more time-consuming than anyone had anticipated. Each piece of equipment had to be carefully carried by hand along treacherous paths that were barely suitable for experienced hikers, let alone heavily loaded rescue workers. During this period, the Indonesian authorities made a controversial decision that would later be heavily criticized. They temporarily suspended the rescue operation due to deteriorating weather conditions. Dense fog had reduced visibility to less than 5 meters, and rainfall had made the already unstable volcanic terrain even more dangerous. While the decision was made with the safety of rescue workers in mind, it felt like abandoning Juliana when she needed help most desperately. The suspension lasted for several crucial hours, during which Juliana's family in Brazil experienced their darkest moments yet. Social media exploded with criticism of the decision, with thousands of Brazilians demanding that the rescue continue regardless of conditions. The hashtag #SaveJuliana began trending internationally, drawing attention from rescue experts and government officials across multiple countries. Brazilian President's office issued a statement expressing concern and promising full diplomatic support for the rescue operation. The international pressure began yielding results as Indonesian authorities realized the global attention focused on their rescue operation. The temporary suspension had lasted approximately 8 hours, but when operations resumed on the afternoon of June 23rd, they did so with renewed urgency and additional resources. A helicopter had been secured from a military base in Java, though weather conditions still prevented its immediate deployment. Rescue coordinator Ahmad Shukri announced that teams were now equipped with ropes exceeding 800 meters in length, more than sufficient to reach Juliana's location. However, the challenge had evolved beyond just equipment. The prolonged exposure meant that even if they could reach her, Juliana might require immediate medical intervention that would be impossible to provide in such a remote location. A medical team specializing in mountain rescue trauma was flown in from Bali, bringing portable medical equipment and emergency supplies. Dr. Maid Sutrisna, the lead physician, grimly acknowledged that after 60-plus hours of exposure without food, water, or medical attention, they were likely dealing with severe dehydration, hypothermia, and potentially serious injuries from the initial fall. The drone continued its surveillance missions whenever weather permitted, providing crucial updates on Juliana's condition. The footage was heartbreaking. She appeared motionless for long periods, though occasional slight movements suggested she was still alive. These brief signs of life became beacons of hope that drove the rescue teams to push beyond normal safety protocols. Meanwhile, the Brazilian government had escalated its involvement significantly. Foreign Minister Carlos Franca personally contacted his Indonesian counterpart, while Brazilian rescue specialists were being prepared for deployment to assist with the operation. The case had become a matter of national pride and international cooperation. As evening approached on June 23rd, the rescue operation entered what many considered its most critical phase. The helicopter that had been standing by finally received clearance to attempt an aerial reconnaissance mission during a brief window of improved weather conditions. Pilot Captain Wayan Sujana, with over 15 years of experience in mountain rescues, carefully maneuvered the aircraft through the treacherous air currents around Mount Rinjani's crater. The aerial view confirmed what ground teams had feared. Juliana's location was even more precarious than initially assessed. She had landed on a narrow ledge that was partially concealed by overhanging rock formations, making a direct helicopter extraction extremely dangerous, if not impossible. The downdraft from the helicopter's rotors could potentially dislodge loose volcanic rocks or even cause the ledge itself to collapse. Ground teams had finally managed to position themselves at the top of the ravine with all necessary equipment. Lead climber Kadek Sutama, Indonesia's most experienced volcanic rescue specialist, prepared for what he knew could be a one-way descent. The plan was simple but terrifying. Rappel down to Juliana's location, assess her condition, provide immediate medical aid if possible, and then attempt to secure her for extraction. However, as Sutama prepared for his descent, another weather front moved in rapidly. The wind speed increased dramatically, and visibility dropped to near zero once again. The helicopter was forced to retreat to a safe distance, and the ground operation had to be postponed once more. The timing couldn't have been worse. They had been closer to reaching Juliana than at any point since the accident began. The repeated delays were taking an enormous psychological toll on everyone involved, but none more so than Juliana's family, who were following every development in real time through social media and news updates.